natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you or it's good for the environment. So we have to be very careful with how we say something is natural. Things that people say, well, you should do this or you should do that, and then some other person will come and say, no, that's really bad. You should do this other thing. You should do this other thing. And then you get yourself in a place where it's like, well, then I shouldn't do anything because it's not worth it.
Because we've created this title, sometimes some entitlement around this term of entrepreneur, but the true entrepreneurial spirit that is at the core of that is to find a way to exist, to go from survive to thrive in any way, shape, or form that you can. Any skill, any hustle that you can put out into the world that'll create an opportunity for you, a windfall for you, your family, your community, wherever that might be.
Tell me as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-hosts Victoria Cornelio and myself, Jensen Cummings. In today's episode, we're talking personal sustainability, mindful consumption, health, and well-being with Claudia Cordova. Claudia's specialty is in bridging environmental science, ethical entrepreneurship, and sustainable development, holding degrees in environmental sciences, business creation, and a master's in sustainable development, working from grassroots to global organizations like the UNDP and Consumers International to create climate-smart strategies and resilient communities. Claudia, thanks for being with us.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation. We talked about our podcast being at the intersection. You find yourself at a unique cross-section as well. So I want to start off the conversation trying to understand that intersectionality that you've put yourself in. It's a unique position to be in. Why did you feel there was a need kind of to be at that nexus in sustainability, and maybe what's unique about that space, and maybe more importantly, what's unique about you and why you find yourself compelled to kind of be in that cross section, as I mentioned?
Yes. Well, that's a big question.
Yes, we're going to start very existential.
Sometimes I wonder that myself, where, how did I get here? I suppose my life has always been a bit of everything. There has been, well, I grew up in Mexico City, in an area that is not very, it's not very famous for being a nice area of Mexico City. There's a lot of, population density. But then I moved to the States, to one of the suburbs of Philadelphia. A complete change, where, I used to live in this very packed city, and suddenly I find myself in this very like broad space in the States, and then come back to Mexico City. I find myself going to, parties outside of Mexico City, where my grandfather and my grandmother used to live. These big fields of corn, and just being kids, we used to go hunting for snakes and things. So very different from where I grew up. And then I found myself as well in a private school, one of the most famous private schools in Mexico City, where, entrepreneurship and business is very heavily taught, and there's a big thing for, making money and being innovative and having all these global experiences and things like that. So it's always, a lot of contrast, a lot of things. So that started my questioning of why am I here, and why did I have a chance to be there, and why do other people why don't they have a chance to be there, and why can't people look at the world as I do? And there started being all these questions about those two very different worlds where I found myself in. And I found myself just being very interested in all these questions, and trying to bring up some people, and trying to try and get other people to understand other people's perspectives. And you know so really my quest has been, I think I'm very fortunate for being able to see all those things, from business to social justice and social value, and all these things. So um I'm also a very curious person, and I get bored very easily. So I also kind of look for new things to incorporate, and I always make those connections with things that I've done before, or things that um, I've experienced before. So it kind of went that way, and it has been going that way through my career. And so I find that myself getting everything into sustainability, because sustainability is basically everywhere, and it's everything is tainted by sustainability. And the in the long run, humanity has to be more sustainable if we want to continue inhabiting whichever planet, if it's this one or the next one. But it has to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that was an important question, right? Because I could tell that this was a personal journey, because you don't find yourself again in that intersection if you don't deliberately put yourself there, because it's not a path that you see at university or anything like that. It's like you had to say, I need these different elements pulling me towards my goal, because it's a personal journey. So I appreciate you sharing that. That wasn't too big of a question for you. That was spot on.
Right. And then as you were talking, I was thinking, because you've been involved in all these dimensions of what sustainability looks like, or being in touch with what we would call nature, the fallacy that we're separated from nature and things like that. In your personal understanding, how has the idea of sustainability evolved over time? How would you define sustainability?
Oof, that was a big one.
More big questions.
Because I think sustainability is so complex, and so it's I guess in a way it's easy to understand if you don't go into the nitty gritty of the roots of the thing. So basically, for me, it's just being able to do what you can, like what you do, to be able to exist without a big negative impact, so that future generations can have that enjoyment. Again, it's a big thing with sustainability, because for me, at first, it was just, you don't throw trash into the streets, and you don't and you have these big places with like lawns, and big curated lawns, and just green spaces where you can be. I used to see, well, in Philadelphia, my dad started playing golf. So you would go into a golf field, and you would say, "Oh my gosh, this is so pretty. This is so green." And it just fills my personal well-being. I just see everything is really preserved, and conservation and nature. And as you grow, and as you start seeing other things, you start noticing that not really. It's a golf field is not really sustainable. Uh, a forest with just one type of tree is not really sustainable. Desert might be very much sustainable, and we don't really see it as something that has life, that has created this balance. So I think my view on what it was, that sustainability was when I was very little, has been, turned around completely, because now I know a little bit more about the impact all of those things have. And natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you or it's good for the environment. So we have to be very careful with how we say something is natural. And I think you guys have been talking about greenwashing, and this is something that comes up a lot. Natural doesn't really mean it's good. It depends on a lot of factors, and it depends on that balance that we have.
Yeah, and then I can imagine that ties into the way that you perform mindful consumption, and I don't know what kind of life you live, if a minimalist life or, green focus, these sorts of things. But as an environmentalist, a lot of times we fall into guilt or perfectionism, and that can be quite paralyzing when we're trying to do the best thing we can. So how do you navigate that?
So I think again, my view has changed dramatically over the years, because it's it's one thing to say, oh yes, I'm an environmentalist and I do everything I can, and I found myself to be very impacted by all this, because that would mean I could not get like new stuff, or I would be stressed about what I was consuming. I would be stressed about if I was flying, if I was traveling, if I was doing all these things, right? So in a way, I found out that, well, that's not really sustainable. If I'm not feeling good, if I'm not healthy, if my mental health is suffering because I'm just trying to, stress out about all these little things that I do, or all these little things. I think a lot of people in the environmental sector start feeling responsible, not only for themselves but also for their family members, which it just kills you, because you can't control what others do. You can't control what others things. You can influence that, but you have to be very aware that you're not responsible for anybody else's consumption issues or consumption responsibilities. So I think it's a little bit, you have to think about letting go of some of those responsibilities, of some of those burdens that you have. Yes, be mindful when you're consuming. Like, for example, when we, like, my partner, he's very, he likes squash, and he likes all these flavored drinks, and he's always getting bottles of drink. And at the very beginning, it was so like consuming for me, because I was just like, you can't just buy a bottle of whatever. It's so hard. And he didn't recycle, so now it was like, okay, so I know that what I can do is recycle, or try to recycle as much as possible. I cannot change the way he is. I can influence. I can just say, hey, you know what? We have something at home. Could you wait a little bit and maybe not consume another bottle? Or I'll make you some fruit water, or something like that, where I can influence a little bit, but I cannot change his mindset. We recycle more. He recycles more, and he's like, well, at first it was just a joke, where it's like, oh, she makes me recycle and she makes me do things. But now he's like, okay, so we should recycle. We should put out. I'll put out the recycling. I'll do this. So those are little wins, I think. And again, you have to be very mindful of when you consume, if you really need the things that you're consuming. So I think it's really interesting when you start questioning, like, oh, I like this dress, I'm gonna buy it, and then you're saying, do I really need it? I actually have another dress in that I can wear, so I'll skip it for this time. Sometimes that will win. I think there was this very oh, I went to Purpose Fest, which is a B Corp event in March, and one of the panelists there was saying, well, everybody's an environmentalist until there's a bargain. And she's very right. I mean, we do sometimes fall for that, and it's not a sin to fall for that. But how many times we fall for that, I think that is the question. And you know, we can, when we have that capacity of saying, okay, maybe not this time. Maybe I'll do it next time. So yes, I think that is very important for mindful consumption, and when trying to consume and change other people's minds.
hmm There's two themes that you've mentioned that I'm interested in and want to maybe pull out a little bit more. The word pristine popped in my head when we were talking about the golf course, that we often think of, we're trying to create this pristine utopian environment that then that will be the manifestation of our ability to be sustainable. The reality of sustainability is very messy, right? It's clumsy, right? It's very wrought with the second theme that I thought was interesting, is the judgment. personal judgment that you mentioned, the judgment towards a partner, towards family members, towards your community, towards your country, towards the world, right? And I think it turns people off to sustainability sometimes. Like, well, if I can't be this bleeding heart, green person, then why even try? And then we don't take any steps because we don't see them as valuable or even necessary sometimes. So can you get into the messiness a little bit of that? How do we take away some of that stigma? You've already touched on it, those small little wins. Can you talk a little bit deeper on that when you have conversations maybe outside of your own circles, when you're talking to groups outside your circles and trying to have that influence and impact? How are you seeing the opportunity to kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is very, very important here is communication and understanding. I think that there's a lot of judgment of people who are trying to do good but are not quite there yet. And I think this happens a lot with bigger corporations. And I like to believe that there's good in people and that everybody is trying in some form to do good. So when you're trying to do good and you fail and for some reason you find out that what you're trying to do is even worse for the environment or is not as good as you thought. I always try and tell people, well, think about yourself. If you want to try, I don't know, drawing, for example, you're not very good at drawing at first. So you're trying, right? What if your mom, when you're little, started saying, that's not very good. That's not a very good drawing. You shouldn't draw anymore. How would you feel about it? And yeah, just try to put yourself into the other person's shoes and say, okay, how can I give this feedback without being so harsh and without dismissing this person completely? Because everybody can get better at anything, and sustainability is one of the things that people can get better. And there's so many things in sustainability. There's so many, in business and in personal life, there's so many frameworks, there's so many things that people say, well, you should do this or you should do that, and then some other person will come and say, no, 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 that's really bad. You should do this other thing, you should do this other thing, and then you get yourself in a place where it's like, well, then I shouldn't do anything because it's not worth it. So I think the fact that you recognize other people's efforts and other people's initiatives to actually try and do something is very, very important. Where you can get feedback and say, this is great, you should add this little bit, or you should try and do this other little bit, because then you'll improve on this, you'll improve on that. And I think sometimes that is it's one of the things that some environmentalists go very hard. It's either you're an environmentalist or you're not. But we know humans are, a whole bunch of spectrum. There's a lot of shades of gray. It's not just black and white. So why don't we try and get other people to improve on that sustainability? So I think that's always important. So always important to know where the other person comes from as well, because it's not just, oh, you should do this and you should do that. It's also, why aren't you doing what you are supposed to be doing? Why aren't you? I was talking to Victoria a couple of weeks ago, about this experience that I had when I just came out of university. I was working for a nonprofit called Laboratorio Social MX. They worked with entrepreneurs in violent slums in Mexico City. And we had this entrepreneur. He lived in a very marginalized area, very like top of a hill, and he was a bread maker. He was there, and we were teaching him about business models, and I was there saying like, yes, you should do like the sustainable business model, and you should do this, and you should do that. You should use less plastic, and like when your clients come, don't give them like paper cups, or don't give them paper plates or styrofoam plates. He was using styrofoam at that moment, and he was like, well, I can't really get any like bamboo plates because that's too costly for me. It's not feasible for me economically. And reusable cups, uh, we don't have any water here. So then you go, oh,
Yeah.
how am I? How can I start telling this person what to do when I'm not even taking into account that water is not a basic service that he has? So you have to understand where they come from, where they're at, what things are available for them, and what you can do from their point of view and from their experience. It's always from understanding and conversation.
Yeah, and you touched on working with businesses as well. And this being such a personal journey to you and being something that you're so enmeshed in your personal life, also in your work, how does that, I don't know, how does that come up in your work? Like, what approach do you take with helping businesses navigate sustainability in their own business models and frameworks and in their own work?
Again, I think the understanding where they're at and what their possibilities are is very, very important, and also focusing on the little things, because small businesses can't go into a certification or reporting or all these things. It's like, well, you don't have the time, you don't have the profits. A lot of the businesses I used to work with were what I called like survival entrepreneurs,
Mm.
where they had gone into making their own businesses because there was a lack of jobs, because there was a need to make their family survive, to feed their children. It's not even I want to become rich. It was like I want to have something to give to my children, and I want dinner on the table every day. So these are the things that we don't usually see these entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs or as business owners, but that's what they are, and they're fighting and they're struggling. So it's really interesting when you start talking about social value and purpose and all these things. It's like you're not looking to grow a business, you're looking to maintain a business, you're looking to help the community. And this is, I think, what I liked about those projects when that I was working in Mexico City, because we created this whole network of survival entrepreneurs where they started helping each other. And they started, the business that was the bread maker was donating some of the leftover bread at the end of the day to a local diner. And this diner was also getting donations from another entrepreneur in another area of Mexico City that was focused on, they had organic produce in Mexico City. So really interesting projects, really interesting people. And these people also wanted to rescue this whole cultural practice of organic agriculture in Mexico City, in Chinampas they're called, which are like floating islands. So they were inputting into this. They were getting workers from another organization that we had in these violent slums, where they were recovering addicts that were going into these fields and helping get the produce out. So we created this intricate network where they were very happy with what was coming up. They had various ideas, various things. They started helping the community, and they started getting out of these very tight spots, and able to produce things for their family. So it was really really interesting, really really fulfilling, I think.
That's amazing.
I appreciate that as an entrepreneur. I'm doing air quotes for anybody who's just listening now, because we've created this title sometimes some entitlement around this term of entrepreneur. But the true entrepreneurial spirit that is at the core of that is to find a way to exist, to go from survive to thrive in any way, shape, or form that you can. Any skill, any hustle that you can put out into the world that'll create an opportunity for you, a windfall for you, your family, your community, wherever that might be. So I appreciate you going back to the kind of the nucleus of that. The core of that is driving economic viability for an individual, a family, a community. So I can really appreciate that. When you talk to others that are in your space, your peers, right? Even when you talk on a podcast like this, how are you instilling that kind of drive for understanding and communication within your peer sector? Because to your point, a lot of times we're having a conversation at a cloud level. We need to be talking in the dirt, and we're not even understanding that people don't have access to water. As you're trying to kind of nurture your profession and the space that you're in, and you're speaking at conferences or anything like that, how are you having people who haven't experienced talking to an entrepreneur who doesn't have access to water, who has no chance for the kind of sustainability they're talking to? Let's flip it to them. How are you having conversations with your peers in a way that's allowing them to understand what you've come to understand from your personal experience?
Well, I think I start out with that very very personal story that I have, where it just comes from this personal experience, right? And trying to get them to understand that not everybody understands what they're talking about. I had another experience with when I came to the UK. I was doing my master's, and I took on some part-time roles as a waiting tables. And in one of these jobs, I encountered this guy. He was an Argentinian man. And he asked me, like, we started speaking in Spanish. Everything was like, he was really interesting. I was like, well, why are you here? And he's like, well, I'm here working. I want to, get a better life. This is why I immigrated. And he's like, so what do you do? And I told him, oh, I'm doing my master's in sustainable development. And he's like, huh, and what's that? Oh, it's, just, have you heard about climate change? And he's like, climate change? What's that? I had no words. I was baffled. I was like, oh my God, like,
Of course.
this person hasn't even heard about climate change. Like, what am I doing? What how am I, you know how am I navigating all these things? And then you realize you're in a bubble. So I always try to, when I'm talking to people that are very much into this entrepreneur environments or these business environments, to just say, hey, have you ever thought about the possibility that not everybody is, not everybody knows about what you do. Not everybody knows about sustainability. Not everybody knows about, even tech, um, the AI. Nobody, like, there are people that have never heard about this. So how would you explain it? How would you? So I kind of like try to question them about uh, what they think they're doing and how they would explain all of this to somebody without access to services, with somebody who without um, an understanding of what sustainability is. And there's been quite a few occasions where I've been in a room where everybody's talking about sustainability, all of these like CSR, B Corps, all of these technical words, and then suddenly somebody raises their hand and is like, what is sustainability? You're talking about sustainability, but I have no idea what it is. And everybody in the room just looks at each other and says, okay, we were not prepared for this. So how do you prepare for that? How do you, think about what others are doing, and how do you think about yourself, and what do you want? Do you want your business to grow? You don't have to grow a business. You can just be happy with a small business that just provides for your community. And that's I think the way to make people think about other things, and think about other experiences, because again, sometimes we live in and this is me saying we live in a bubble, but I mean, I myself live in a bubble. I think we have created all these bubbles where the ideal worlds are there, or we're talking about the same stuff when there's somebody in a rural community not very far away that doesn't really know what it is. And talking about that, I think Latin America, we have the idea that, Europe is so advanced, and so they know about these things, they know about sustainability, they know about climate change, they know. And then when you get here, you realize a lot of people haven't even heard about that, even in the first world countries. So yeah, just I try to make people understand that it's not just them in their little bubble. There's so many other people and so much understanding that you can spread if you talk to other people and you really understand them.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that really hammers the point home. Thank you so much.
Every story actually has to start at the beginning. And we're having way too many stories in chapter 12. And people are like, I don't know how this story started. And most great stories, the single greatest entry to a story is once upon a time, because we need to start at the beginning of that story. Real quick, I want to tell you this, because this is something that I use in this space, and maybe it sparks something for you. But we call it. My background is in culinary as a chef, restaurant owner. We've had restaurants for generations in my family, and there's something called the hamburger story. And if you tell somebody, hey, I got this great story about a hamburger, people go, okay, hamburger, I know what a hamburger is. And then all the details that come after that can make some sort of sense. But if I say, yeah, it's this thing that's got meat and lettuce and tomato and onion and pickles and bread, you have no idea that I'm talking about a hamburger, because I've never told you I'm talking about a hamburger. So I think about the hamburger story a lot, and it's like, start with the punchline, like tell them what you're talking about. I'm talking about a hamburger, so that allows them to understand, because we're just confusing the conversation. So appreciate that. We're out of time. I had one really quick question. Is your dad still golfing? How's that relationship there with you and your dad and golfing?
Yes, he is still golfing. I think yeah, with my again, with my family, there's some things that you win, some things that some battles that you win, some battles that have to kind of let go. And especially with older generations, my dad is a former PwC, so Big Four consultant. So there has been some challenges, and before there were some really big fights where it wasn't helping anybody. Everybody was getting mad and nobody was changing anything. So yeah, it's just things that okay, I'll let this one go, but then you have to you know see about other things, see about buying less Amazon, or seeing about buying
Yeah.
less things. So
Find those little wins, those opportunities. I could tell when you said golfing and your dad was like, oh, there's something there. There's something still driving you that you're like, if I can figure out my dad and the golfing and all that, I'll have figured out this unsolvable puzzle. So I can really appreciate that. Claudia Cordova, thank you so much. Once again, everyone, we've been talking personal sustainability, mindful consumption, health, and well-being. It's complicated. It's messy. Find those small wins. I think that was my biggest takeaway. Find those small wins and reduce the judgment you have of yourself, your others, your family, your community. I think that's the opportunity to start making a real difference that has massive potential ripple effects. We appreciate you all.
Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk power, let's talk change. From rural lights to brighter days. Equity rising, voices strong. We're building tomorrow where we all belong. Tangelic Talks, energy, equity, pride. Empowering the world, side by side. A spark becomes a fire, a vision that's true. Together we rise, it starts with you.